Hello everybody. I hope you're having a great day today. I know it's been a bit of a minute since I posted a video. Just got busy with work, busy with the holidays, everything else. But now finally have a little bit of time to create some new content for you. So I hope to get onto a more regular schedule. So I'm gonna get some help with these videos. And that way we get a more reliable cadence in terms of when you can expect to see content. For today, we are going to be discussing buying and selling motorcycles. So I'll be sharing my experiences with purchasing my first motorcycle, and specifically buying a used motorcycle. So buying from a private seller. And you know, if you happen to be selling a motorcycle, I'll also be sharing my experiences selling that bike as well. If you've seen some of my other videos, I have talked about my first bike. It was a 2010 Honda Shadow RS. I purchased that as my learner bike, and I also sold it once I got my hands on this bike. If you're watching this video now, it is December, the end of 2020. And now is actually, depending on where you live of course, now might actually be a great time to purchase a bike. It's not really riding season, it's cold, not as many people are on the road, and so those who are selling bikes are probably going to want to get rid of them and be more lenient on negotiations. So depending on where you live, now might be a great time to buy. So if you're looking at purchasing, you know, keep an eye out. You never know when a good deal, that perfect bike is going to come up for sale. And the selling points are usually at the end of the riding season and right before the start of a riding season. So right before the start of a riding season, demand goes up, so prices are also probably going to go up a little bit higher. Sellers know that the bike is probably going to get sold around what they're asking for, and so they may not be as willing to negotiate at the start of a riding season versus the end of the riding season. But again, it's all contextual. It depends on where you live. Where I'm at in California, even though it's been rainy, you can see the roads are a little bit wet. It's still my riding season anyway. I'm never not riding unless the weather is, you know, really absolutely horrible. So take a look at your postings, see what's available. But the first step in purchasing a used motorcycle is to know what you want to buy. Know what you're looking for. Do some research. First, you gotta really understand, are you looking more for a sport bike? Are you looking more for a cruiser? How strong of a bike do you want? Do you want like a 300? Do you want a 750? Do you want like a 1100, 1200, whatever? Know what you're looking for, because that is going to refine your search criteria and make it easier to find the right bike. If you don't know what you're looking for, I recommend browsing around, again, doing some research, really understanding the different dynamics between sport bikes versus cruiser bikes versus naked bikes versus touring bikes, so on and so forth. So know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you're going to get overwhelmed with the number of options out there, and it's going to be significantly harder to find the right bike for you. Know what's in your budget. So this will help you write off things that are drastically out of budget, and will help you understand what are going to be some things within budget, and what's a good kind of a market price for a bike. Now, the prices are going to be a little bit more subjective. Some are going to be higher, some are going to be lower, but have a good market value price in mind. In general, I recommend to go for bikes that are within 5 years, 5 to 8 years, I would say, depending on the type of bike. And ideally under 10 to 15,000 miles. That's going to be a pretty good sweet spot. That's where, when I was doing my research, a lot of the bikes were within that range. Of course, there were some that are like way out of that range, and there were some that were a year old. So obviously newer bikes are going to go for more, older bikes are going to go for less, but again, it's all contextual. It really depends. So know what your bike you're looking for, do your research, and then once you have an idea, start browsing some different postings. So the second step is to look at various sources for where people put up postings. So what worked for me, I did a lot of research on Craigslist. I looked at Facebook Marketplace and Cycle Trader. Cycle Trader got me some good ideas for what is the availability of certain bikes. A lot of the bikes I found were from dealers, so that's also an option, is to buy a used bike from a dealer. But Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist were definitely the primary two resources I used if I'm trying to purchase from a private seller and not go through a dealer. Both of those are pretty good. And I actually ended up buying my first bike, the 2010 Honda Shadow RS from Craigslist. I found a posting there, and I reached out to the guy, and we went from there. So browse around. Don't be in too much of a hurry to buy a bike. I know you might be excited if you're buying your first bike. Don't get too excited and overly commit to one type of bike. That was the mistake that I did, and I got really excited about the 2010 Honda Shadow RS, got super stoked, really excited about it, almost to the point where unless the bike was not functional, I would pretty much buy it. And that was a mistake I made, and I overpaid for that bike. So don't get too excited, and be willing to negotiate more, and be willing to let a bike pass if it's too far out of your budget. So look around, use some resources, check every day, create some alerts, because you never know when that really great bike is going to get posted, and sometimes it can be gone within a week or even days if it's a really good deal on a really popular bike. So stay vigilant and keep looking at those postings every day. The next thing you want to do is step 3. Once you have found a potential bike, you want to reach out. So reach out to that seller. And this is almost when that first interaction, that interview process begins. So when you're buying a bike, you're not just buying a bike, but you're also determining, is this seller trustworthy? Is this someone I want to make a purchase from? Different riders treat their bikes differently. And so you're also gauging, has this person probably taken responsible care of the bike? Or was this person probably treating the bike really harshly, didn't really take care of it, and now it's got some issues and they're trying to sell it and get rid of it? So you're also kind of interviewing the seller, and this is where you kind of have to use your kind of gut feeling. You have to kind of measure the experiences that you have with the seller, both indirectly and directly. So reach out to the seller, have some prepared questions. Don't just say, hey, is a bike available? Ask some questions. You want to learn about the bike as much as you can. And you want to minimize the number of surprises that could happen just because you didn't ask the right questions. So reach out to the seller. Hopefully they'll respond. So in my experience, for every 5 people I would reach out to, only 1 would respond to me. So don't get your hopes too high on one bike and one seller. Reach out to different people if you find multiple potential bikes. So have some prepared questions. And you also want to evaluate the posting as well before you reach out. So actually, let me take a step back. Step 3 is actually evaluating the post itself. So when you're evaluating the post, you want to make sure, are there multiple pictures of the bike from different angles in good lighting? You don't want to be taking a look at old, crummy, low definition, hard to see, dark photos where you can barely tell if there's even a motorcycle in the picture. You want to have a very clear picture, so that way you can really look and see, are there any obvious imperfections with the bike? How was the bike posed? Have they cleaned the bike? Does it look to be in pretty good condition? Look at the seat, look at the pipes, look at the handlebars, look at the paint, look at everything, the tires. Look at everything as much as you can from those pictures. A good seller is going to provide multiple pictures if in the posting upon request. So evaluate the posting, the pictures. Have they put a good description in the body of the posting? Have they described the bike, the miles, the condition of the bike? Is it up to date? Do they have a title in hand? Has the bike ever been dropped? Those are all critical things that you want to look for. Now, if a bike has been dropped and a seller is honest about it, I actually take that as a good sign. Dropping a bike isn't an immediate sign isn't an immediate no for me. If a bike's been dropped and it was low, like you dropped it when you were parking or whatever, that's not a big deal. But if it was dropped when you're going 80 miles an hour and it slid hundreds of feet across the highway, that's a bit of a different story. So don't automatically write off if a bike has been dropped or not. But you do want to know if it has been dropped and if the seller is being forthright with the care and any damages that the bike has sustained while it was in that rider's ownership. So if it seems that the posting is pretty transparent and there is good information in there, there's information about any modifications, when the last thing was serviced, has it been professionally inspected, those are all good signs. If a posting has a lot of great information in there about the bike, about how it was ridden, so on and so forth, that's a pretty good sign. If you just have a posting that says for sale, no lowballers, blah blah blah, you're taking a gamble on that bike at that point, and the seller. So you can still reach out by all means, but I wouldn't get my hopes up for those types of postings. A good seller is going to put effort into their posting, and they're going to want to make sure that the bike gets in a pair of good hands. So then the next thing, step 4, is reach out to the seller. So as I mentioned, for every 5 people I reach out to, I might get a response back from 1 person. So don't get your hopes up on one particular bike or one particular seller. Reach out to multiple people. Hedge your bets, as they say. And have some questions prepared. So if there's any information that is not in the posting, this is a great time to ask those questions. And be polite, you know, there's people too. So say, hello, my name is blah, blah, blah. I found your posting on this site, and I'm interested, and I'd like to inquire about seeing this bike, and I do have some questions.
Can you eat like that?
And sometimes you can also ask questions that are also in the post, just to kind of test them, to make sure that the information remains accurate over time. One also good thing to understand is the bike still being ridden? So depending on the age of the post, if they posted saying, hey, I'm selling the bike for 10,000 miles, but they're still riding it for work, you know, by the time you see the bike, depending on, you know, how much they're riding, it could be 2,000 miles later. And that's going to influence the price of the bike, potentially. So ask questions. A good seller will be more than happy to answer questions. They shouldn't have much to hide, if anything to hide. So ask questions like, when was the last time it was serviced? Do you have all the manuals? Have you done any modifications to the bike? Do you continue to ride the bike? Has the bike ever been dropped? What did you typically ride the bike for? So ask some good basic questions just to get a sense of how much information is the seller willing to provide. If they give you one-word answers and they're seemingly very rigid on the answers that they're giving, that's not necessarily a good sign. What's up, guys? But if they give very detailed answers, that's always a good sign. It means them being forthright and transparent with the bike. Also ask if there's any damage done to the bike. And if they share all the little things that are going wrong with the bike, that's a good sign. When I was selling my bike, there were scratches there were barely perceptible scratches on the tank. There were scratches on the exhaust from the previous owner. So there were little dents here and there, and those just come from riding. And I was forthright. I shared every single little imperfection with every potential buyer. So that way when they come and see the bike, they're not like, well, you didn't tell me about that scratch, you didn't tell me about that scratch, and you didn't tell me that scratch, well, I'm going to knock off $500 just because you didn't tell me about that. So I was very upfront with my previous bike, and you should look for the same thing. Good sellers should share everything they can. Of course, they're still going to try and make the sale. So, you know, they might hide a few small things here and there, but, you know, it's a give and take. All right, so you've emailed the seller, and everything looks good. They're transparent with their answers. They seem honest. They seem articulate. So the next thing is to meet up and schedule a time for you to go and see the bike and ideally test ride the bike. So schedule a time, figure out where is the best time and place to meet up. Ideal scenario is you can meet up at their house, so that way you can see the bike cold. Not everybody is always comfortable selling out of their garage or out of their home, so you know, use your best judgment there. If they take the bike somewhere for you to see it, then the bike's going to be warm, and that might mask some issues. A cold bike is going to reveal any potential issues. A bike that's warmed up is going to be able to hide that. It's going to have an easier time starting and riding. So ideal scenario is you can meet up at their house, meet up at their garage, ask them to leave the bike cold, ask them to not start the bike, and again, ideally leave the bike where it is normally kept. This will help you to assess the actual condition of the bike, and if it's leaking anything, if there's any obvious imperfections. You know, if they leave the bike where it's stored and you look down in the garage and you can see there's this big puddle of oil, then you know it's leaking. So schedule time to meet, ideally in their garage, and this gives you an opportunity to see the bike cold and to make a true evaluation of the condition of the bike. One thing you should also do prior to meeting is pre-negotiate the price of the bike. So if someone's saying, hey, I'm going to sell this bike for $5,000, and you reach out to them saying, hey, I'll buy it for you for $4,200 or $4,200, and they say, great, sounds good, come over and buy the bike. You should go over there with $4,200 in hand, but you should also set the precedent of, if there's any surprises, if there's anything I don't like, I may ask for a lower price. So set that expectation. So if they are hiding something and you catch it, they can't go, well, you already agreed to $4,200. You know, you don't want to surprise. You don't want to surprise people, right? That kind of creates a bad taste in people's mouths. So set the precedent of, okay, if everything looks good, I don't find any surprises, everything is as you say it is, I'll buy the bike for $4,200. But if I do find something and there's major issues, then I'm going to renegotiate. So set that expectation, but have that money in hand when you go to see the bike. So then go meet up, evaluate the bike, see, is it leaking anything? Is the bike too clean? Like, has the seller gone overboard in terms of cleaning everything to try and hide any mistakes or hide any issues? Like, if it's leaking, is everything too clean and it hasn't had a chance for those leaks to reappear? Look at where the bike was stored. Look at the condition of the garage. You know, do they keep it clean? Because that'll be an indication of, okay, if they keep everything clean, then they probably take good care of the bike. You know, stereotypically, if the seller is older, probably means they take better care of the bike versus a younger person who, you know, might have had more spirited and fun rides with the bike. But that's just stereotyping. So, but it's just one piece of data, one perspective. You can have very irresponsible older people and very responsible younger people as well. So use your best judgment there. But you're getting an overall perspective. You're still evaluating the seller to see if they're trustworthy. And this is where, again, you still gotta trust your gut. Something seems off, you gotta make a judgment call if you think it's worth the risk or not. But sometimes you can ask them the same questions again, just to make sure that their answers are consistent. Check the odometer, start the bike up, make sure it runs, make sure it sounds good when it starts up. What I did was I looked at YouTube videos of that specific bike starting up so I have an idea of what it should sound like if it's, again, assuming it's stock and there aren't any major modifications to it. Listen for sounds. Use all of your senses, sight, smell, hearing, possibly touch, you know, depending on if you feel anything weird like in chips or if anything doesn't feel right as you're riding it. Don't know about taste, but you know, who knows? You do you. But anyway, yeah, so evaluate the bike, make sure it starts up, make sure it sounds good, make sure there's no real surprises, everything is as expected. And then with money in hand, most sellers are going to allow for a test ride. So let the bike idle for a little bit, not too long, just a minute or two should be enough. And if everything seems to be going all right, you know, ask to see if the seller can let you take it out for a test ride. Common convention is if you drop the bike, you buy it. So be careful, don't ride out of your limits. It's helpful to know the surrounding area, but if you don't go too far. But if you're an experienced rider, you're probably not watching this if you're an experienced rider because you'll know how to buy a bike. But yeah, don't ride outside of your limits because you're on an unfamiliar bike in an unfamiliar area potentially. So be safe and don't go too crazy. You don't want to buy a bike that you didn't actually end up wanting to buy just because you rode out of your limits and dropped it. So as you're riding, you can check the condition of everything. Does all the, or before you ride, do your T-clocks, do the lights work, the tires, are the tires still within spec? Are they still within their lifespan? Check the levers, your clutch, your brake. Do there seem to be scratches on those? If a seller says, oh yeah, the bike was never dropped, but yet you see that like the brake or the clutch lever has been bent and there's a bunch of scratches, and if there's pretty obvious signs that the bike was dropped, then that's a sign that you probably shouldn't trust that seller. Again, a dropped bike isn't an immediate deal breaker, it's just a point of consideration. It depends on how badly the bike was dropped. But again, if they're being forthright that the bike was dropped, then yeah, that's to be expected. Check the condition of the seat. Again, you're looking at everything. Check to make sure that the shocks are in good condition. Make sure it's not leaking any oil, leaking any fluids. Check the fluid levels. You want to make sure everything as it should be. Take it for a ride. Keep your mask open so that way you can smell everything. If there's anything that's burning or if there's anything that smells strange, you don't want your mask or your helmet to be hiding that. So open up your visor, let those smells in. Make sure it's not jittery, it accelerates as it should. And really make sure that there's no surprises in the handling. Do the brakes seem pretty good? Again, shocks, acceleration, all the major things for a bike should work as intended. And take it for a little spin. Put it through its paces a little bit. If you're an inexperienced rider, this is where it might be a little difficult to understand if something is not as it should be. When I did my first ride, there could have been something wrong. Luckily there wasn't, but if there was something wrong, I probably wouldn't have caught it if I was going to be honest with myself. Because it's all new. There's no context of what's right and what's wrong. So sometimes it's harder to gauge. So if you have an experienced rider friend that can do the test ride for you, that might be something you want to do. Have them come with you. Have them at least do the inspection with you. So after you do your test ride, the next step is to make an evaluation on if you are going to purchase this bike or not. If something seems off, if something seems off, all of your interactions with the seller have been tentative, you're not really quite sure, you're not that psyched about the bike's not as great as you think it should be, trust your gut. Again, don't get too excited, make the right decision. If it doesn't seem right, walk away. So you can let them know, hey, thanks for the test ride, I'm not going to purchase the bike, it's not the right bike for me, you'll get your money back, walk away. Sellers shouldn't try to force you into making a deal. If they try to force you into making a deal, that's another red flag, that's another bad sign. So the seller should be happy if you buy the bike, but shouldn't try to force you into something that you don't want to do. But if you are going to purchase the bike, congratulations. You've already negotiated, assuming there isn't anything that seems too off about the bike. Go with it. When I sold my bike, the guy tried to ask for a few $100s off for gas, for this, for that. I was like, no, dude, it's your bike. It's your responsibility to fill up the gas. And if everything rides perfectly fine, then we're going to go with the price that we already negotiated. So the seller may stand their ground, but again, only try to renegotiate if there's something that is actually off about the bike. So once you've decided to make the purchase and you've already handed over the funds, the next step is to do all the paperwork. So in California, it's typically just the title that you sign over, but I've always recommended to also do an additional bill of sale, just as a double measure, just to really make sure if anything goes wrong, if you need any additional paper trail, that you have extra information that you need. One thing I did completely forget about, before you do the test ride, inspect the title. Wow, I completely forgot about that. So before you even step foot on the bike, make sure that the title is correct. It is in their name. You've inspected the VIN number, and the title that they have is for the bike that you are going to be test riding. That is a very important fact that I forgot to mention. So, assuming that the title is all good, you go to a test ride, everything's good. Then that is when the seller will sign over the title to you. So you fill out all the necessary information and go from there. Again, I also do the bill of sale. One other things I do is I let them take a picture of my driver's license, and I also take a picture of their driver's license. Again, just to make sure that everything is good to go. There's no surprises. There's no missing information. Everybody has all the relevant pieces of information for the buyer and the seller. So once you've handed over the funds, filled out all the information on the title, the bill of sale, the bike's basically yours at that point. So the only other thing you got to do is to take the bike to the DMV, or really just take the paperwork to the DMV. You don't have to take the bike there, but fill out that information, and then you are good to go. The bike is now officially yours. But after making that initial purchase, again, depending on the experience of the rider, of the buyer, if you're a very experienced rider and the bike seems in a great condition, and you have no reason to suspect that you wouldn't be able to get home, then you're probably safe to ride home. If you're an inexperienced rider, I recommend load up the bike, borrow a truck, or if you have a truck, use your truck, you get a ramp, and load up the bike that way. Again, it's an unfamiliar bike, and if you're inexperienced, depending on how far away you live, I would not recommend taking an unfamiliar bike on unfamiliar roads home, because you don't want to get caught off with any surprises as well. So that's my recommendation, but use your best judgment and do what you think is best for yourself. So once you load up the bike, get some practice on it, you do have to go to the DMV, register the bike within a certain number of days, and then go from there. Do be prepared to pay taxes on the bike, pay for any registration. So again, in my experience, I wouldn't say I'm a super experienced buyer or seller. I've only bought and sold one bike. But the process is pretty simple and straightforward if you know what you're doing and knowing what to look for. There's a ton of other resources that I looked at online, so I do highly recommend those as well. There's a great video by Revzilla where they talk about how to buy from a dealer, how to buy from a private seller, talking about a lot of the same information. So do some research and really understand what that process is going to look like. And that's going to pretty much wrap it up for today's video. So hopefully this has been helpful for you. If you're a new rider, we all start somewhere. It can be a little intimidating buying a used first bike. I know it was for me, but luckily I did all my research and I did make some mistakes along the way. As I mentioned, I really overpaid for the bike. The guy really took advantage of me from that regard. I let my excitement and my emotions get the better of me, and I didn't really understand the actual value of the bike. So do your research and really understand what is a good price point for that bike, depending on its condition, how many miles it has, and if there's anything extras that you are getting with the bike. So when I purchased the 2010 Honda Shadow RS, the seller did include the manuals, some saddlebags, some miscellaneous, oil cleaner, some cleaner for the chain, little things here and there. Ultimately, things that should not have inflated the price as much as it did. But again, inexperienced and excited leads to overpaying. So use your best judgment, use your research, know what you're buying and know what you're going after, and be an educated buyer. Do your research from that standpoint. What's up, guys? But that's what we're here for, share experiences and to learn. So I'm going to wrap it up here, everybody. I hope you sincerely have a great rest of the year. I hope you get started on 2021 on the right foot. Again, have that positive mindset. 2020 has been a hell of a year for everybody. I know for some of you it's been harder. It's been rough, and things won't magically get better just because it's 2021, but hopefully we're making progress in the right direction, and a lot of it kind of starts up here in your head. So with that, be brave, everybody. Do good. Take care of yourselves. Peace.